Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. In today's video, I am super excited to chat about the new Pat McGrath holiday collection. So I'm filming this the day she dropped the initial teaser, so all I have is the information on Instagram from Pat McGrath and also from Trend Mood about this collection. But based on that information, I tried my best in today's video to dupe the two eyeshadow quints and also the two cheek palettes and the lip products. So if you're interested in hearing about my overall thoughts about this collection, what I'll be picking up, and also see me try to dupe this collection, then just stick around. So first off, in case you guys are new to my channel, Pat McGrath is basically my favorite makeup brand. I have almost all of her products, and so every single time she has a release, I look at those very carefully and, try to decide if I have dupes already in my collection. I absolutely love pretty much all of the products that she's released, so I do have some biases in that direction. But I will admit, when I first saw this holiday video, I was a little bit surprised just how big it was. So her holiday releases always are quite large. So last year she had the Mothership Mega, she had some blush palettes, two quads, and then some other smaller products here and there. But I'm pretty sure that this year's launch is the largest holiday launch she's ever done, because she's added in those colored mascaras, some lip products, her holiday highlighter again, and she's replaced the quads with quints. So to be completely honest, when I was watching this launch video, to me it kind of seemed like when you do a first draft of an essay and you just kind of like throw all of your thoughts down there on the page, and then in theory afterward you need to kind of go back and edit through and be like, yeah, this part's a little bit redundant, or you don't really need to put everything in one essay. But I kind of feel like that editing process didn't quite happen with this launch. I mean, I love Pat McGrath. The more products from her, the better. But as I was watching this video, it just kind of felt like, wow, it's still going. Okay, we still have some more products here. So there's going to be a lot to chat about today, to say the least. So to start out, let's talk about this Celestial Nirvana Mothership Mega palette. So I picked up her previous two Mothership Megas, so I will definitely be picking up this one as well. I love these palettes. They're some of my favorite Pat McGrath palettes. These are pretty pricey. They're typically around $78. And given that they're plastic packaging, it's not really the most luxurious Pat McGrath experience, but you get 18 shades, which is incredible. That's almost two Motherships worth of shades. So to me, these are still really good deals if you're someone who is new to Pat McGrath or if you're a Pat McGrath collector. And to me, this color story really excited me. So it does look a little bit haphazard when you first look at it. It is divided up into three color stories of neutral, cool, blue-violet, and then warm crimson fuchsia. But for me, what really stood out about this palette is the fact that Pat McGrath has finally given us colorful mattes. So if you look at this palette, the shimmers are really absolutely nothing to write home about. We have like champagne golds, rose gold, gold, copper. So that's what you'll find in pretty much every single Pat McGrath palette. But what's really remarkable about this palette is we finally have a green matte, we have a blue matte, we have a purple matte. So basically in the left 2/3 of the palette, we have a lot of more unique shades in the matte category. And I am extremely excited about this, because if you guys collect Pat McGrath palettes, you know that she really doesn't deviate very much in terms of her matte shadows. Pretty much all of her mattes are either in the kind of gray brown category or in the sort of coral mauvey rosy category. So she really doesn't go into colors in terms of greens or blues or purples. And so I am extremely excited about that. And I think this will be an excellent palette to pair with some of her other palettes. So yeah, I'm extremely excited about this Mothership Mega Omega. Definitely will be picking that up the moment it drops. Now the next item is one that I've heard a lot of people are excited about, but for me personally, this actually is not really that appealing to me. So these are the two Quints. She has one of them that's in a very neutral gold color story, and then the other one is more in kind of a mauvey peachy color story. And for me, when I first saw these, they appealed to me kind of from a distance, but when I looked at them shade by shade, the problem for me and these palettes is that they each only have one matte shade. And at least the way I do my makeup, I like to have a matte transition, then a matte deepening shade, and then kind of some shimmers all over the lid. And so I feel like it's going to be hard to get a lot of versatility from these palettes because you basically have one matte for each of them that you can put all over your crease, and then 3 metallic shimmers and 1 highlight shade. And so basically every single look is going to be only different in terms of what shimmer you put on your lid, and you're not going to be able to really have that contrast of light and dark necessarily. This is supposed to have a new formulation in it, so I am intrigued from that perspective. So I'm not saying I'm definitely not going to pick these up. It depends a little bit on the price. But this is definitely the product I wanted to see if I could dupe in today's video because none of these shades look particularly special to me. But I'd be curious to hear what you guys think about this down below, because if you're really excited about it, that will kind of, nudge me more towards picking it up. But at least in terms of my personal preferences, I'm not really that excited about this particular launch. Next, we have the blush and highlight palettes. So these definitely drew me in, and I absolutely love Pat McGrath's blush and highlight formulas. They're some of my overall favorites. In her official launch, she didn't really say very much about the shades in them, but between Trend Mood and some of the other posts she's done, I think we can piece together some of the shades. So in one of her posts, she did reveal what's in the Divine Blush and Glow Cheek Palette Nude Venus. That one has Desert Orchid, Divine Rose 3, Nude Venus, Paradise Venus, and Sunset Nectar. And so I already have Desert Orchid, Nude Venus, and Paradise Venus. So for me, I already have 3 of the 5 shades in this. So I don't think I'll be picking this up. I will show you guys swatches of those 3 shades though, because those are some of my all-time favorite blushes. And so if you don't have those shades, I do recommend picking this up because I think that's a really beautiful curation of some of her most everyday friendly blushes. The other one is the Divine Rose one. This one is more in the pinky reddish category, and this one seems like it'll have more shades that are new. So we'll have Divine Rose, which is a shade that I already have and I love. I would highly recommend that shade. The new shades according to Trend Mood are Desert Orchid 2, which looks like it's going to be a deeper version of Desert Orchid. Desert Orchid is one of my favorite shades, and so I'm excited about that. And then we have the highlight Nude Nectar, and then the blush Peony Rose. And Peony Rose looks like it's going to be a pretty bright coral pink shade. And so I'm most likely going to pick up this cheek palette because even though I already have Divine Rose, there are at least going to be 3 new shades. I haven't seen yet what the last shade is. That one looks a little bit different from her existing shades, but it's not listed on Trend Mood as being a new shade, so it'll be interesting once more details come out about that. But at least there are 3 new shades, so I think that is probably enough for me to justify buying it. The next products are the individual highlighter in Venusian Peach, which is a peach nude with silver sparkle, and then a new Divine Blush in Nude Venus 2, which is a peach nude with satin pearl finish. I think I'm going to probably pass on both of these just because these are quite pricey individual products. Usually the highlight is around $60 and her individual blushes are around $40. And since I'm going to be picking up that blush palette, I think I'm covered in terms of new shades there. But these are really beautiful, so I'll show you guys some comparisons with last year's launches just to hopefully help you guys make a decision. Nude Venus 2 in particular looks like a mix between Fleurtatious, Nude Venus, and Divine Rose. And so I have those 3 shades, so I'll give you guys swatches of those. Next, we have these 2 new lipsticks. One is in Nude Venus, which is a nude coral, and then the other is in Forbidden Love, a classic red. I really love the engraving that she has on these. This is kind of new for Pat McGrath. Usually her bullets are just kind of that smooth velvet finish for her MatteTrance lipsticks. I do really love her MatteTrance formula. It's what I have on my lips right now. I'm someone who typically does not get along well with matte lipsticks, but her formula is one of the few that I'm willing to wear. Pretty sure I'm not going to pick up either of these though, just because I feel like I have enough lipsticks at the moment. Next up, we have her Dark Star mascara in colored form. So we have a blue one, an aquamarine one, and a pink one. This is for me a very easy pass because my lashes are very straight and really do not hold a curl at all. And so I'm pretty picky when it comes to mascaras. I barely ever wear mascara. And if I do, it really has to be a waterproof formula that's really specially designed for super straight lashes. So this just doesn't really interest me at all. I've tried Pat McGrath's mascaras in the past and they just haven't worked for my lash type. But it looks like a lot of fun. If you're someone whose lashes are much more naturally curled, I think this would be a really fun way to just bring some spice to any sort of look. And then next we have some minis. So we have a mini Divinyl duo that has the shade Nude Venus and Temptress. I'm most likely not going to pick these up, or at least I might wait until these go on sale. I do really love Pat McGrath's minis. They are a lot of fun. So I will show you guys some swatches of some of my existing minis. But in terms of the lip gloss, it looks like a lot of Pat McGrath lip glosses I have already. Like I'll show you guys some swatches with Dare to Bear, which is one that immediately comes to mind, but I also have a few others in that sort of very light, nudie, peachy pink category. For the Divinyl, I will also show you guys a swatch of the shade that I currently have, which actually, it might be Nude Venus. I don't know, it's a name that sounds similar to that. So I'll have to pull out that shade and show you guys a swatch of that. It's not my favorite formula, so I'm not super excited about that release. And I'm also not picking up her kohl liner because that is something she re-releases in new boxes pretty much every time she has a new launch nowadays. And I really love her Permagel liners and don't really feel the need to pick up a new liner from her. Though if you guys have tried her kohl liner, please let me know your thoughts down below because that's a product I just haven't really heard much about from anyone's reviews. So now that we've finished the run through of all the products, let's go into finding some dupes. So let's start with the eyeshadows. So we have two eyeshadow quints here. One is called Nude Allure, that's the warm nude bronze one. And then the other is Bronze Bliss, which is cool platinum bronze. So let's start with the one on the top. So the moment I saw this, my initial thought was, isn't this just a curation of Divine Rose 1 from Pat McGrath? I mean, it looks pretty similar to me. So we don't have any information yet about the shade names, so I am only going off the pictures of the swatches and the palette itself. By the time this video goes up, there might be some more info, but just to give you guys context for what I'm going off of. So the first shade looks like it's definitely one of her Skin Show shades. It looks quite similar to this shade over here, Skin Show Glow. So for today's look, I'm going to use that as a dupe. And then the matte shade in this looks fairly similar to this mahogany shade. So this is what I'm going to use for today's look. The next shade looks a little bit more unique. There wasn't necessarily anything that screamed out to me as being an obvious dupe, but there are a lot of shades I have from Pat McGrath in this kind of rose goldy direction. For today, I might just use this shade because I want to minimize the number of palettes I'm dipping into for the dupe. I don't really think the one in the holiday set is necessarily a dual chrome, but I think it'll have a pretty similar effect on the lids in terms of just the overall shade. And then next we have this sort of pinky mauvey shade, which I'm gonna dupe with this shade over here. I think that the one in the holiday collection is maybe a little bit more purpley in comparison to this one. But again, in the interest of just kind of keeping it all in the same family, we're gonna go with that. And then the last shade, which is kind of a bronzy gold, is much more bronzy than I think this golden shade is over here. It looks almost like you mix that gold with this shade over here, which is much more bronzy in tone. So I might just kind of dip my brush in between these two. I mean, if I were doing a much more thorough dupe, I think I can probably find another bronze somewhere in my Pat McGrath collection that is more similar to that, just because every single Pat McGrath Mothership has at least one bronze shade, and I have all of her Motherships. But for now, this is going to be my backup, just mixing those two. Now the next palette is making me dip into a few more of my Motherships. So the first shade, which is a Skin Show shade, looks a little bit golden, but also very platinum. So for today's look, I'm going to go into the Skin Show shade in Bronze Seduction, which has that golden sheen to it. It's a little bit confusing to me based on the pictures if this is going to be more like a bright white platinum or more of a yellowy platinum, but I'm going to go with this. And then the next shade looks mostly like a black shade, though it looks like there might be a little bit of blue in it. For dupes though, I'm just going to go in with her black matte. This is in Sublime. It's also in Subliminal and Subversive. So if you have any of her first three palettes, then you have her beautiful extreme black formula. I mean, just look at that swatch. That was very, very black. Next, we have this very cool toned, kind of silvery shade. So I initially thought of this shade over here because I saw a little bit of green in that swatch. So that's, I think, what I'm going to use to dupe it today. Though, now that I swatched it, this definitely looks a little bit more green than what we're seeing in the pictures. So I actually might mix that with this shade over here. And this is Decadence, by the way. So that you can see is much more of a silver metallic. So I think these two kind of crossed is giving me the effect that we're seeing in that picture. And then finally, we have those two beautiful bronze shades, which at least in picture look fairly similar to each other. So one that I thought of was this bronze from Bronze Seduction. This is sort of a very standard golden brownie bronze. So I think both of them look fairly similar to that. Maybe this is a little bit more warm toned. I also have this bronze from Sublime. Let's swatch that. Okay, that might be a little bit deeper, though that definitely has a little bit more of the coolness. Let's also actually go into her newest palette, Moonlit Seduction, and swatch this bronze over here. Okay, that looks a little bit more similar, maybe. It's amazing how many different tones of bronze you can have in a collection. And then let me also pull out this one from Midnight Sun. This is a little bit of a darker bronze, but okay, does have some of that golden hue to it. Interesting. I feel like the bronzes that she has in this new palette are a bit more golden than a lot of her other bronzes. Because if I look at these swatches over here, definitely the vibe of this is a lot less gold than what we have in this new palette. Let me also just go into Celestial Divinity. We have this bronze, which is again more orangey, huh? Okay, what about this guy over here? Okay, that might work. Running out of real estate here. Okay, here we go. Interesting. Okay, this shade actually looks kind of promising. Alrighty, actually this second palette is turning out to be more unique looking than I would have anticipated, because that was definitely the one when I first saw this, I was like, oh my god, entire palette of Pat McGrath bronzes, that's a lot. But let's get started with the easier one. So I have Divine Rose over here. So I'm gonna go into this mahogany shade, since this is the only matte that we're gonna get in this palette, and go ahead and apply this to my left eye and just blend this out. Usually if I use this palette, I always start with Veloria as a transition shade. It's one of my favorite transition shades, but this mahogany shade is quite beautiful as well. And the nice thing with Pat McGrath mattes is they do blend out very easily, so I don't anticipate having issues with this, even though this is the only matte I'm using. I am very curious though about this new formula she's releasing with this. She often uses quads as a place to experiment with new formulations, and we often never see those same formulas again. Like if you guys got her Valentine release from last year, the Eternal Eden quad has these very unique creamy matte formulas that she tried out for that quad and then just never introduced again. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of formulas are in this quint. Okay, so here we have that mahogany shade all over. You can see it's fairly pigmented. And then we have 3 shimmers, so I'm gonna just kind of put them side by side. So I'm gonna first start with this deeper shade and kind of just like dip it back and forth between these two, try to cocktail something up. And I'm gonna use this in the outer portion of the lid. There we go. Hopefully that is at least somewhat similar. And I do think these shades look more different than what I anticipated before doing these swatches. So hopefully they actually are quite different from her existing collection. But I still like to do these sorts of dupe looks just because it gives me a sense for myself as well. Do I even like this kind of color story on the lids enough to buy it together in a palette? So there's that attempt of that bronze shade. And then let's go into this rose dusk shade, and I'm gonna put this just kind of all over the center. And then cleaning off that brush, I'm gonna take a little bit of this jewel chrome shade, put that over here. Oh wait, I forgot just how yellow this jewel chrome can look. Okay, let's back up for a moment and see if I can find something a little bit more peachy pink. Okay, let's actually dip into last year's holiday palette. We have a couple of shades that are kind of peachy pink. So I'm going to take this one over here and just cover up that dual chrome. Hopefully that tones down some of that yellow. All right, yeah, you still kind of see that yellow poking through, but that's okay. All right, there we go. And let me also just show you guys a swatch of that. Let's put this over here. And I think that looks reasonably similar to what we had in these pictures. Alrighty, so here is this eye done, and even though I think, not all of the tones are precisely what I'm seeing in the promo pics, I think this can still give you a general sense of whether this is a color story you're interested in. Now for the other eye, this is going to be interesting. I've never just used her black shade directly on the lid without any sort of transition shade. So this is where I am really curious if there's going to be a totally different formulation, because what scares me a little bit about the second palette is only having a black matte and no other matte shade. I mean, maybe you could start with one of those shimmers in the crease, but all of them do look fairly metallic. So that will be really interesting to see once the reviews start coming in terms of whether folks are able to use the black as a transition shade or whether if any of the other ones are sufficiently satin in finish. But we're gonna try this out today. And you can see like the black is blending out nicely. It can definitely be sheared out. So it turned out that my camera stopped recording while I was still applying eyeshadow. So fortunately I discovered that not long after that happened, but let's just rewind a little bit. So I finished blending out the black eyeshadow, or at least the first layer on my eyes. So now let's start applying the other shimmers. And I took a little bit of time off camera just to refine the swatches I had and to really think about what matches the images we have online. So I'm gonna go in now with this shade from Midnight Sun. That's this guy over here. So I'm gonna just take a little bit of this and sweep this kind of on the outer portion of my lid, overlapping this a little bit with the black shade. Then flipping that brush over, I'm going into this shade from Moonlit Seduction. And this is the shade that I put on the center of this lid. Just gonna build that up a little bit more so you guys can see it. And then for the last metallic shade, I'm gonna do that cocktail between these two shades in the Decadence palette. So I'm gonna first take a little bit of this and sweep this on the inner third. And then I'm going to take a little bit of the greenish shade. And I'm just going to kind of go back and forth between the two of them until I get a shade that I like that looks similar to what we have in the pictures. So here we have this eye done, and also while I was playing around with more swatches, I realized that this shade from Celestial Odyssey is probably more similar to that shade that we have in the first palette. So I'm gonna actually take some of this and put it on top of the inner third. I know getting that shade was the hardest for me, so I have like 3 different eyeshadows now on my inner thirds, but just want to be as faithful as possible to what we see in the pictures. So I went off camera to put on some eyeliner, so here we have the final eyeshadow looks. So on this side we have the Nude Allure Warm Nude Bronze look. And then on this side we have the Bronze Bliss Cool Platinum Bronze look. So I redid the swatches, so hopefully this looks a little bit more similar to what we have in the promo pics. So these are the same shades I showed you guys in Divine Rose 1, but I switched out this shade Heavenly Body from Celestial Odyssey. And then over here for the Bronze Bliss, we have the Skin Show shade from Bronze Seduction, the black shade from Sublime. We have a mixture of those 2 metallics from Decadence. And then we have the bronze shade from Midnight Sun and the bronze shade from Moonlit Seduction. On the whole, I would say to me these look like decent dupes. The main differences I see are this shade, Rose Dusk, is definitely a little bit more rosy and neutral in comparison to the shade in Nude Allure, which is a little bit more purpley. And then these 3 metallics in Bronze Bliss just look a little bit more golden in comparison to what I have here as dupes. In terms of these looks themselves, I was quite impressed how even though each of these looks only had 1 matte shade, I feel like I'm not really missing the additional mattes. The Pat McGrath mattes just blended out so beautifully. Of course, since this new palette has a new formula, I'm not sure how it'll compare with these matte shades in her Mothership palettes. But on the plus side, my original concern about there only being 1 matte doesn't seem to necessarily be that big of a deal. I like both of these looks. They're quite beautiful. I think basically if you want something a bit more neutral, leaning mauve, then this is your look. Whereas if you want something more full glam, leaning gold and platinum, then this is your look. But both are super fun. So now let's get into the blushes. So I'm basically going to swatch for you guys the exact dupes that I have. So let's first go into this Nude Venus palette. So it has Nude Venus here. This is a peachy pink. That palette also has Desert Orchid, which is one of my all-time favorite blush shades. Perfect everyday nude on my skin tone. And then that palette also comes with Paradise Venus, which is a beautiful terracotta shade. So really lovely combination. If you guys are interested in a palette for really a beautiful everyday look, I think this Nude Venus palette is gorgeous because you have these 3 plus the new Divine Rose 3 and Sunset Nectar. Sunset Nectar is a brand new shade, so I don't have that, but let me give you guys a swatch of Golden Nectar, which is one of her OGs in this formula. And then also I have Venus Nectar, which is sort of more peachy rather than golden. So I'm sure Sunset Nectar will look somewhat similar to these 2. It's going to be in that same formula, which I really love. Moving right along, the next palette has Divine Rose, which is also one of my all-time favorite blushes. This and Desert Orchid are my 2 favorites from Pat McGrath. The rest of the shades in the second palette are TBD. We have the new Desert Orchid, Nude Nectar, and Peony Rose shades. And then I'm not sure what that last shade is, but it kind of looks like a deeper version of this. So we'll see. Just for reference, in case you guys are curious though, I think the last shade looks the most similar to Lovestruck to me, either that or Cherish. So let me just swatch Lovestruck just so you guys can see. That's a beautiful sort of fuchsia pink shade, which to me kind of looks like the second shade in the swatches. And then in terms of the singles, here is the Holiday Single Highlighter from last year. This is a really, really beautiful shade. I love this highlighter. It's so luxe and fun to use. Honestly, this year's holiday highlighter looks pretty similar to this. It has a peachy undertone as well and those silver sparkles. And so I'll be really curious to see comparison swatches because I'm probably not going to pick it up and it looks super different. But at least based on both the description and the picture so far, it looks somewhat similar to this previous highlighter. In terms of the new blush, it looks a lot to me like Fleurtatious in her existing line, kind of like a mix between Fleurtatious and Nude Venus. So here is Fleurtatious for context. And then let me swatch Nude Venus next to that. So I feel like it's gonna be kind of a hybrid between these two shades over here. And here's a close-up of all those swatches. So again, we have Nude Venus, Desert Orchid, Paradise Venus, Golden Nectar, Venus Nectar, Divine Rose, Lovestruck, last year's holiday highlight, Fleurtatious, and then Nude Venus. I do want to put some of these shades on my cheeks though, just to show you guys how they look. So let's go into Nude Venus to start. I'm going to put this kind of on the apples of my cheeks on this side. You can see this is a really pretty shade with a satin shimmer to it. Next, I'm going to take some of Desert Orchid and put that sort of next to it. This is much warmer, has a little bit more of a nude orangey undertone to it. So basically I'm working on building up that Nude Venus trio that I swatched over here. So there is Nude Venus next to Desert Orchid. And then let's take some of Paradise Venus just for the outer portion to provide a bit more color. So this can be a really beautiful gradient that you could put together if you pick up that Nude Venus palette. There we go. Very nice. And you saw just how beautifully all of that blended in. And today I just have unset foundation on, so you know it's pretty impressive if it blends in that easily. And then on this side of my face, I'm going to go in with Golden Nectar since this is the maybe slightly more golden side. So here we have it with Golden Nectar. You can see how beautiful that shine is. Then on the other side of my face, I'm going to go in with Divine Rose since this is basically the Divine Rose palette. So here you can see that's sort of a pinky mauvey shade, beautiful for an everyday basis, especially if you're doing a cooler toned look. And let me also just take a little bit of Fleurtatious just to show you guys a little bit of that as well. So I'm putting that over here. It's a bit more neutral. It looks super light and pan, but actually still shows up pretty well against my skin tone. This is one where when I swatched it in store, I thought it just looked like white powder, but as you can see, it actually looks pretty nice on the skin. And then I have no idea if Lovestruck is going to be in this collection, but since it looks similar, let's just take a tiny bit of Lovestruck and put it over here. And then finally, I'm going to take some of Venus Nectar and sweep that on this side of the face. So there we go. This is basically my attempt at duping the Divine Rose palette, and this is my attempt at duping the Nude Venus palette. What do you guys think? Do you have a preference in terms of these two color stories? So looking at my face right now, I would say hindsight is definitely 2020. I should have swapped the two cheeks because I think this pinky look actually goes a lot better with the slightly more cool toned vibes we're getting from this eye look, whereas the really warm toned kind of sunset vibes we have here would have gone much better with this look. But it's okay. My face is mismatched anyway, so let's get into some possible dupes for the lipsticks. So first off, I only have one matte red lipstick from Pat McGrath, which is this mini of Elson 2. So I don't know how that will compare with this Forbidden Love, but I'll just give you guys a swatch here just in case you're curious. This is an extremely pigmented formula. One swipe basically gives you full opacity. And as I mentioned at the top, it is a comparatively comfortable matte lipstick formula. In terms of Nude Venus, I have a few possibilities to swatch for you guys. So first off, I have this mini of Christy, which is what I have on my lips today. So I think this has some similar sort of nudie vibes going for it, maybe a little bit more pinky. And then I also have Beautiful Stranger from that same trio from Pat McGrath. This one is a little bit deeper than Christy. And then finally, I have Flesh 3. I think this will be a lot deeper. Okay, yeah. So definitely, I would say that Christy is probably the most similar MatteTrance lipstick that I have. For context, Timtalia describes Elson 2 as a moderately warm-toned dark orange. So even though it looks pretty pure red on my skin, my guess is that classic red might be a little bit more blue-toned. And then Timtalia describes Christy as a very warm-toned medium pink. And so the Nude Venus lipstick, based on some of the promo pics that I've seen, looks much more peachy and warm-toned. My guess is that it might look a little bit more similar to Venusian Peach, which I have in her Satin Allure formula. So you can see that that's a tad more warm tone than what I have on my lips right now with Christy. In terms of the minis, I actually do have her Divinyl in Nude Venus, so I can give you guys that swatch over here. It is a really beautiful shade. I can't say that this is my favorite formula ever. I'm not a huge fan of the shimmer particles in it, but it is very smooth, kind of feels like a lip balm, just not a very hydrating one, and leaves a beautiful finish on the skin. And then I have two mini glosses that I thought might be similar. So first off, we have Love Potion. Let's swatch that over here. Her glosses in this sort of lighter shade are typically much more sheer, so my guess is that this one won't be that different. I also have Dare to Bear over here, so let's swatch that next to it. Dare to Bear is just a little bit more pigmented and peachy. And here we have the close-up. So my guess is that what we'll see is Classic Red will probably be a cooler tone version of Elson 2. And then this is Nude Venus in the Divinyl. So imagine the same shade in this sort of MatteTrance formula and also in this lip gloss formula. And while we're at it, let me put some lip gloss on because my lips are feeling a tad bit dry. So this is Dare to Bear. I think that also helped to make my lips look a little bit more peachy. Although now that I'm thinking of it, it's probably helpful for you guys to actually see Nude Venus on the lips. So let me take this off and put Nude Venus on. All right, here we have bare lips, and now let's go into the Divinyl in Nude Venus. Okay, here we go. So here is the Divinyl in Nude Venus on the lips. Very creamy, shimmery formula. So zooming out, here we have the final look. What do you guys think? So on the whole, I would say that I'm quite proud of myself for putting together these looks. Definitely there were some shades that were pretty hard to dupe and I think will be quite unique in this collection, but it was still a helpful exercise for me to put these products on my face to get a sense of, are these sorts of looks that I would want to recreate and have dedicated palettes to. On the whole, I wouldn't say that I've changed my mind about any of the products yet. I'm definitely still picking up Mothership Mega and the Divine Rose Cheek Palette. It's the other products that I will probably wait until there are some initial reviews around to make my final decisions. But I think if I didn't have a channel, I probably wouldn't pick up anything else just because while these eye looks are quite nice, they're not really blowing my socks off. And because each palette only has one matte, I think there's a lack of versatility in terms of the types of looks you can put together. For me, I see those mini palettes as being really handy for travel, but whenever I travel, I do like having some variety so I can put together multiple looks. To me, the mini Midnight Voyage palette that she released earlier this year was much more versatile in terms of the types of looks you could create, even though that was just 6 shades. But because these are much more monochromatic on the whole, I think you're gonna get a very similar vibe to what I have on the lids right now. In terms of the cheek palettes, they seem like really nice curations, and I would highly recommend checking out this one if you haven't already. Since I do have 3 of the 5 shades on my cheek right now, I can definitely endorse that one. This one I'm still not sure about in terms of how exactly it'll look, but I imagine it will be something with this kind of vibe. In terms of the lips, I do really like the shade Nude Venus, but it's not my absolute favorite shade from Pat McGrath, so chances are I'm not going to pick that up, but we'll see. I am kind of tempted by the engraving on the lipsticks, so depending on how luxe the packaging looks in person, I might or might not pick that up. So that's it for today's video. I hope this was helpful for any of you who, like me, are super excited about this holiday collection. I would love to hear in the comments below what you guys think about this. Are you gonna pick up any products? And how do you feel about the curation this year? If you guys like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. Thank you all so much for joining me, and I'll catch you next time. Bye!